Imagine a woman in the Ottoman harem who outlives 3 sultans and quietly runs the empire from behind a curtain. Not a princess in a love story, a regent who signs off on wars, executions, and taxes. This is Kösem Sultan, the most powerful woman of the Sultanate of Women. Topkapi Palace is still there, same walls, same domes, same guarded gates. But the man on the throne is no longer Suleiman, and the woman at the center of the story is no longer harem. This time, the main character is someone who learned to rule for much longer and paid a much harsher price. Her name is Kösem. Once, she had another name, Anastasia. A priest's daughter from some quiet corner of the Balkans or a Greek island. Sources argue whether it was Tinos, Bosnia, or somewhere else, but they agree on one thing: she did not grow up dreaming of an Ottoman palace. Her world was small and familiar: church bells, the smell of bread, girls fetching water, boys teasing them on the road. Then, like a page torn out of a book, that world disappeared. Raiders came. A scream, frightened animals, people running with whatever they could carry, and then rough hands, ropes, and the long road toward a city she had never seen. On the slave market, she wasn't Anastasia anymore. She was just one of many girls, lined up under the eyes of people who spoke a language she didn't understand. But someone was watching more carefully. An official from the imperial court noticed the way she held herself, the quickness in her eyes, not just a pretty face, a mind that paid attention. He chose her for a different destination, not some rich merchant's house, but the imperial harem of Sultan Ahmed I. Inside the harem, her life split in two. The visible part was silk, baths, perfume. The invisible part was training. She was taught Islam, theology, a new language, calligraphy. She learned mathematics, literature, embroidery, music, singing, the full curriculum of an imperial concubine who might one day stand close to the throne. Her old faith, her old customs, her old childhood stories receded like a coastline behind a departing ship. Ahmed noticed her, not instantly, not like in a melodrama, but over time her intelligence and calm energy stood out. At around 15, she became his haseki, his chief consort, a title that had once been created for harem herself. With it came real privileges, a generous daily stipend, private apartments, a say in how things were run inside the harem. Everyday life for Kösem, at first, didn't look like running an empire. It looked like choosing fabrics for clothes, managing servants, making sure the younger girls were properly trained and disciplined. It looked like late-night conversations with Ahmed, where she listened more than she spoke and learned how he thought about power, fear, and justice. But around them, the hierarchy shifted. Ahmed's powerful grandmother Safiya was sent away to the old palace. His mother, Handan, died soon after. Suddenly, the 2 women who should have been above Kösem in the harem's female ladder were gone. In that vacuum, the young favorite with a quick mind began to rise, not just as a consort, but as the woman who could organize this closed female world. She had children, sons, Murad, Ibrahim, and others. Each birth raised her status, but also raised the stakes. In a system where fratricide was an accepted tool for securing the throne, every son was both hope and potential tragedy. When Ahmed died, Kösem's life did not crumble. It became more complicated. There were other claimants, other princes, other women with their own sons. Through a maze of palace politics, she helped her boys get to the throne, first Murad IV, then later Ibrahim, and finally her grandson Mehmed IV. She wasn't always in the spotlight, but she was almost always in the room, or just behind the curtain. Literally behind the curtain. When Murad was still too young to govern, Kösem became regent, naib-e-sultanate. She sat behind a screen at divan meetings, hearing the viziers argue about taxes, wars, justice. Her voice would come through an attendant, but everyone knew whose words they were. She arranged appointments, removed officials, kept her own network of judges, commanders, and scribes. Letters from leading statesmen arrived addressed to her. Answers were drafted with the help of trusted Jewish intermediaries called Kira, who handled her correspondence and finances. From the outside, it still looked like she was just a mother protecting her son. From the inside, it was clear this was a woman running an empire through everyday decisions. Her days as regent were not glamorous. They were filled with crises, janissary unrest, financial troubles, a disastrous war over Crete that she herself pushed for, and a Venetian blockade of the Dardanelles that brought hunger to the capital. While the official decrees carried the Sultan's name, the responsibility for navigating this storm often sat quietly in her lap. Everyday life in those years might surprise you. Yes, she attended to matters of state, but she also had to oversee the harem's rhythm, the meals, the baths, the marriages of her daughters to powerful men, the discipline of eunuchs who sometimes forgot their place. She was known for being strict with the black eunuchs who guarded the harem, refusing to let them build their own mini-kingdom inside the palace. When she found out they were having lovers among the women, she had those women removed, freed or sold, to cut off that line of influence. In between political decisions, she also did something that never makes it into the dramatized series. She gave away money. Kösem used part of her enormous wealth to fund soup kitchens, help orphaned girls, support poor women, sponsor a mosque complex that would carry her name. It wasn't just charity for the soul, it was also a way to build loyalty among people far beyond palace walls. In the streets of Istanbul, people knew her not just as a powerful shadow behind the throne, but as someone whose foundations could feed you if the city was in crisis. But power in that world never stood still. After Murad, her son Ibrahim took the throne, a man shaped by years spent locked away in the kafes, a cage-like section of the harem for potential heirs. He was unstable, fearful, prone to cruelty and excess. At first, Kösem tried to guide him too, but favorites around him, concubines, flatterers, opportunists, grew jealous of her. They whispered that she was too controlling, that it was time for the old queen to step aside. For a while, Ibrahim pushed her out, into summer residences, away from the center of decisions. He humiliated his own sisters, gave away their jewels to his concubines, and overturned the careful hierarchies Kösem had once helped maintain. The palace routine, which she had kept orderly, slipped into chaos.
Outside the walls, people were running out of patience. Heavy taxes, failed wars, hunger because of blockades, all of this built up a pressure that had to find a target. In 1648, the janissaries and religious scholars rose up. Ibrahim lost the support he needed. Terrified, he ran back to his mother, asking for protection he had previously thrown away. This time, even Kösem couldn't save him. She took part in the decision to remove him from the throne, hoping, maybe, to keep him alive in the kafes and put her grandson Mehmet IV on the throne, with herself again as regent. But the system was brutal. Ibrahim was strangled. Whether she wanted his death or not, her hands were tied to that outcome by history. Now she was Büyük Valide, the great-grandmother, regent for a third generation. Few women in history have ever had that kind of continuity. Wife of a sultan, mother of sultans, grandmother of a sultan, and ruler in all three roles. And yet, the pattern that had once helped her now turned against her. There was another woman in the palace, Turhan, the young mother of Mehmet IV. According to custom, Kösem should have retired to the old palace, stepping aside for the boy's own mother to become Valide. Kösem asked to do exactly that. She was tired. But the same political and religious leaders who had relied on her experience refused. They told her, in essence, "You know how to hold this together. Stay." Staying meant standing in Turhan's way. The palace split into two camps, those who backed the seasoned grandmother and those who backed the young mother. Whispers turned into plots. Each side began thinking not just about the present, but about who would control Mehmet in the years to come. Everyday life for Kösem in those last years was a mix of habit and paranoia. She still went through her routines, meetings, charitable work, supervising the harem. But at night, the corridors felt different. The same walls that had once protected her now echoed with footsteps she didn't entirely trust. In 1651, the game ended. One night, while the palace slept, armed men loyal to Turhan's faction entered the harem. They searched the rooms looking for Kösem. According to some accounts, she tried to hide in a closet or behind a tapestry. According to others, she was betrayed by a mark, a piece of jewelry, a lamp still burning. They didn't spill royal blood. That wasn't the Ottoman style. Instead, they strangled her, with a curtain or silk cords, depending on which version you believe. A woman who had kept sultans alive, secured the succession, and stabilized the state through uprisings and wars, died in the dark, fighting for breath in rooms she had ruled for decades. The next day, the palace continued its routine. Servants lit lamps, cooks prepared meals, eunuchs guarded doors, scribes sharpened their pens. Mehmet IV grew up and became his own kind of ruler. Turhan stepped into the role Kösem had finally vacated. Outside, people still spoke of Kösem, Some cursed her as manipulative and power-hungry. Others remembered her soup kitchens, her help for poor girls, her mosque complex. Historians would later call this whole era the Sultanate of Women, a time when the empire's fate was often shaped by the women behind the curtain. Kösem did not rule with armies or crowns. She ruled through routines. Who got which post? Who married whom? Which petition reached the sultan? Which letter left the palace? Which girl in the harem would be taught to read? It was in those small daily choices that she built an invisible architecture of power. But the same system that lifted her up also destroyed her. In a world where power flows through family, every woman's rise makes her both indispensable and dangerous. And yet, centuries later, when we whisper the names of the women who truly ruled from behind the screens of topography, her name is almost always there, side by side with harem, the fire and the ice of the Sultanate of Women.